The sun hung high over the serene landscape of Earth, its golden rays filtering through the dense canopy of trees that surrounded Capsule Corporation. The sprawling compound, a testament to Bulma Brief's genius, buzzed with the hum of advanced technology and the occasional roar of a distant key blast. It was a peaceful day, or at least as peaceful as it could be when Saiyan royalty was involved. Vegeta, the prince of all Saiyans, stood in the training yard, his arms crossed and his usual scowl etched into his features. His black hair, spiked and unyielding, caught the sunlight as he glared at the horizon, as if daring the world to challenge him. Nearby, a small group of animals, birds, squirrels, and even a curious fox, gathered at the edge of the yard, their eyes fixed on the Saiyan prince with an unusual intensity. This peculiar scene did not go unnoticed by Bulma, who leaned against the doorway of the main building, a steaming cup of coffee in hand. She raised an eyebrow, her sharp mind already piecing together the oddity. "Vegeta," she called out, her voice carrying the familiar mix of amusement and exasperation, "since when did you become the Pied Piper of the forest?" Vegeta's scowl deepened, but before he could retort, a new presence made itself known. From the edge of the training yard emerged a young woman, her presence as calm as the breeze that rustled the leaves. Her name was Lila, Earth's foremost animal communicator. With her earthy green attire and a staff adorned with feathers and beads, she looked like she had stepped out of a fairy tale. Her eyes, a deep shade of emerald, held a wisdom that seemed to transcend her years. The animals around her moved with a sense of purpose, as if they were an extension of her will. Lila's gaze met Vegeta's, and for a moment, the air seemed to crackle with unspoken tension. "Prince Vegeta," Lila said, her voice soft but carrying an undeniable authority, "I've been sent to assist you. The animals have been restless lately. They sense something is coming, something even they cannot fully comprehend." Vegeta snorted, his pride bristling at the idea of needing help, especially from someone who communed with creatures he considered beneath him. "I don't need some earthling whispering to squirrels to tell me what's coming," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "If there's a threat, I'll handle it myself." Bulma stepped forward, her tone firm. "Vegeta, don't be an idiot. If the animals are sensing something, it's worth looking into. You of all people should know better than to underestimate the instincts of living beings." Vegeta shot her a glare but said nothing, his pride warring with the logic of her words. Lila, unfazed by his hostility, approached him with a calm demeanor. "The animals are not the only ones who sense it," she said, her eyes narrowing slightly. "I can feel it too, a disturbance in the natural order. It's faint, but it's there. And it's growing." Before Vegeta could respond, the ground beneath them trembled, a low rumble that sent the animals scattering in all directions. From the sky, a streak of light descended, crashing into the training yard with a force that sent shockwaves rippling through the air. When the dust settled, a figure stood amidst the debris, his presence radiating an aura of malevolence. He was tall, his armor a dark, metallic gray, and his eyes glowed with a sinister light. "Prince Vegeta," the figure said, his voice a deep, resonant baritone, "I've come to challenge you. The Saiyan race has grown weak, complacent. It's time to remind the universe of our true power." Vegeta's lips curled into a smirk, his Saiyan blood boiling with the promise of battle. "And who are you to speak of the Saiyan race?" he demanded, his ki flaring to life around him in a brilliant blue aura. The figure chuckled, a sound that sent shivers down Lila's spine. "I am General Zorn, last of the Saiyan elite guard. I've been watching you, Vegeta. You've grown soft, living among these earthlings. But today, I will remind you what it means to be a true Saiyan." Without warning, Zorn lunged forward, his speed a blur even to Vegeta's trained eyes. The Saiyan prince barely had time to raise his arms in defense as Zorn's fist connected with a force that sent him skidding backward, his boots digging trenches into the ground. Vegeta's smirk widened, his Saiyan pride ignited. "Not bad," he admitted, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "But let's see how you handle this." With a roar, Vegeta surged forward, his fist glowing with ki as he aimed a devastating punch at Zorn's midsection. The general twisted his body, narrowly avoiding the blow, and countered with a spinning kick that Vegeta blocked with his forearm, the impact sending a shockwave that shattered nearby windows. The two Saiyans clashed in a flurry of punches and kicks, their movements a blur of speed and power. Zorn's attacks were precise, each strike calculated to exploit Vegeta's weaknesses, while Vegeta's raw power and unrelenting aggression kept the general on his toes. The ground beneath them cracked and splintered with each impact, the air thick with the scent of ozone as their ki collided. Lila watched from a safe distance, her staff glowing faintly as she channeled her energy to protect the surrounding area from the devastation. As the battle raged on, Vegeta's frustration grew. Zorn was stronger than he had anticipated, his techniques honed to perfection. With a growl, Vegeta decided it was time to end this. Enough, he shouted, his aura flaring brighter as he powered up to his Super Saiyan form. His hair turned a radiant gold, his eyes a piercing blue, and his power surged to new heights. Zorn's eyes widened in surprise, but he quickly regained his composure. Impressive, he admitted, but not enough. With a roar of his own, Zorn transformed, his aura shifting to a dark, menacing red. His power rivaled Vegeta's, the two Saiyans now evenly matched. The battle intensified, the sky above them darkening as their ki clashed in a spectacular display of power. Vegeta launched a barrage of ki blasts, each one aimed with deadly precision, but Zorn dodged and countered with equal skill. The ground around them was reduced to rubble, the air filled with the sound of their roars and the crackle of their energy. Lila, her staff now glowing brightly, stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Stop this," she commanded, her words carrying a power that made both Saiyans pause. "You're destroying the land, the animals, everything. There has to be another way." Vegeta and Zorn turned to her, their eyes filled with conflicting emotions. For a moment, it seemed as though her words had reached them, but then Zorn's expression hardened. "There is no other way," he said, his voice cold. "This is the way of the Saiyans. Only the strong survive." Vegeta's eyes narrowed, his pride warring with the truth in Lila's words. He knew she was right, but his Saiyan instincts demanded he prove his strength. As the two Saiyans prepared to resume their battle, a distant rumble caught their attention. The ground trembled once more, this time with a force that made the previous quake seem insignificant. From the horizon, a massive shadow loomed, its presence radiating an aura of pure malice. Lila's eyes widened in fear, her connection to the natural world screaming in warning. "It's here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The true threat." Vegeta and Zorn exchanged a glance, their rivalry momentarily forgotten. The shadow grew larger, its form taking shape as it approached. It was a being of immense power, its very existence a blight on the natural order. The animals, sensing the danger, fled in all directions, their cries echoing through the air. Lila gripped her staff tightly, her resolve hardening. "We have to stop it," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Together." Vegeta's smirk returned, his Saiyan blood boiling with anticipation. "Finally, a real challenge," he said, his golden aura flaring brighter. Zorn nodded, his red aura matching Vegeta's intensity. "For the Saiyan race," he said, his voice filled with determination. The two Saiyans, once bitter rivals, now stood side by side, ready to face the looming threat. Lila stood with them, her staff glowing with a light that seemed to hold the power of the earth itself. As the shadow drew closer, the air grew heavy with tension. The true battle was about to begin, and the fate of the world hung in the balance. The sun hung low over the horizon, casting long shadows across the Capsule Corporation training grounds. Vegeta stood with his arms crossed, his usual scowl etched deep into his features. Beside him, Goku scratched the back of his head, grinning nervously. The tension between the two Saiyan warriors was palpable, but it was nothing compared to the unease that had settled over the group since the arrival of Earth's animal communicator, Lila. Her ability to understand and influence the emotions of even the most hardened warriors had already caused ripples in their dynamic, and now, those ripples were threatening to become waves. Lila, a petite woman with a calm demeanor and an uncanny connection to all living things, stood a few feet away, her hands clasped in front of her. She had been brought in to help Vegeta confront his inner turmoil, but the experiment had taken an unexpected turn. In Part 1, her attempts to reach the Saiyan Prince had inadvertently awakened a dormant power within him, a primal, uncontrollable rage that even Vegeta struggled to contain. Now, as the group regrouped, Lila's presence was a double-edged sword. She was both their greatest hope and their greatest liability. "This is ridiculous," Vegeta growled, his voice low and dangerous. "I don't need some earthling meddling in my head. I've faced far worse than a few stray emotions." "But that's the thing, Vegeta," Lila said softly, her voice carrying an eerie calm. "This isn't just about your emotions. It's about what's been buried deep within you, something even you might not fully understand." Goku stepped forward, his usual cheerfulness replaced by uncharacteristic seriousness. "She's got a point, Vegeta. You've been acting different lately. If there's something going on, we need to figure it out before it gets out of hand." Vegeta's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, it seemed like he might lash out. But then, a faint tremor shook the ground beneath their feet. The group froze, their senses immediately on high alert. In the distance, a plume of smoke rose into the sky, accompanied by the sound of distant explosions. "What now?" Vegeta muttered, his fists clenching. Before anyone could respond, a figure appeared on the horizon, moving at incredible speed. It was Piccolo, his usually stoic expression twisted into one of urgency. He landed in front of the group, his cape billowing behind him. "We've got a problem," he said, his voice gravelly. "A new threat has emerged. Someone, or something, has been gathering energy from the planet's core. If we don't stop it, the entire planet could be destroyed." Goku's eyes widened. The planet's core? That's not good. Who's behind this? Piccolo hesitated, his gaze flickering to Lila before returning to Goku. "We're not sure. But there's evidence that this new threat is connected to her." He gestured toward Lila. The group turned to her, their expressions a mix of shock and suspicion. Lila's face paled, and she took a step back. "Me? I don't understand. I would never." "Save it," Vegeta snapped, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "If you've been playing us this whole time, you'll regret it." Lila shook her head frantically. "I swear, I don't know anything about this. I'm just trying to help." Before the argument could escalate, the ground shook again, this time with enough force to knock everyone off balance. From the direction of the smoke, a massive creature emerged, a towering, serpentine being made of molten rock and glowing energy. Its eyes burned with malevolent intelligence, and its roar echoed across the landscape. "That's it," Piccolo said grimly. "The energy from the planet's core, it's taken physical form." Goku clenched his fists, his usual grin replaced by a determined scowl. "Then we'll just have to take it down. Vegeta, you with me?" Vegeta smirked, his earlier anger momentarily forgotten. "TCH. Don't insult me, Kakarot. Let's see who can take this thing down first." The two scions shot into the air, their auras flaring as they powered up. Piccolo followed close behind, his hands already glowing with energy. Lila hesitated, her heart racing. She knew she couldn't fight, but she couldn't just stand by and do nothing. Taking a deep breath, she focused on the creature, trying to sense its emotions. What she found was chaos, a swirling maelstrom of rage, pain, and confusion. It's not evil," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the din. "It's in pain. It doesn't know what it's doing." But her words were drowned out by the sound of battle. Goku and Vegeta launched themselves at the creature, their fists and energy blasts striking with devastating force. The creature roared in anger, lashing out with molten tendrils that seared through the air. Goku dodged effortlessly, his movements a blur, while Vegeta met the attacks head-on, his Saiyan pride refusing to let him back down. Piccolo hung back, charging his special beam cannon. "Hold it still," he shouted. "Easier said than done," Goku replied, narrowly avoiding a swipe from the creature's massive tail. Vegeta, however, saw an opportunity. "Kakarot, distract it. I'll take care of this." Goku nodded, darting around the creature and unleashing a barrage of energy blasts. The creature turned its attention to him, giving Vegeta the opening he needed. The Saiyan Prince raised his hands, gathering energy into a massive sphere. "Galit gun. Fire!" The beam struck the creature square in the chest, sending it staggering back. But before Vegeta could celebrate, the creature's wounds began to heal, the molten rock flowing back together as if nothing had happened. "It's regenerating," Piccolo shouted. "We need to hit it with everything we've got." As the battle raged on, Lila's mind raced. She could feel the creature's pain, its confusion. It wasn't attacking out of malice, it was lashing out because it didn't know what else to do. If she could just reach it, maybe she could calm it down. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, her hands outstretched. "Stop!" she called, her voice trembling but determined. "Please, stop fighting." The creature turned its massive head toward her, its glowing eyes narrowing. For a moment, it seemed to hesitate. But then, with a roar, it swung a massive clawed hand toward her. "Lila, move," Goku shouted, but it was too late. Just as the claw was about to strike, a blur of blue and white intercepted it. Vegeta stood in front of Lila, his arms crossed in front of him as he blocked the attack. The force of the blow sent him skidding back, but he held his ground. "What do you think you're doing?" he growled, glancing back at her. "You're going to get yourself killed." Lila's eyes widened. I thought I could help." Vegeta's expression softened, just for a moment. "You can't help if you're dead. Now stay back." With that, he launched himself back into the fray, his attacks more ferocious than ever. Goku joined him, the two scions working in tandem for once. Piccolo's special beam cannon finally charged, and he unleashed it, the beam piercing through the creature's chest. This time, the wound didn't heal. The creature let out a final, ear-splitting roar before collapsing, its body dissolving into molten rock and energy. The ground stopped shaking, and the air grew still. As the dust settled, the group regrouped, their expressions a mix of relief and exhaustion. But the victory was bittersweet. The creature was gone, but the threat it represented, and the questions it raised, remained. Lila approached Vegeta, her hands trembling. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You saved my life." Vegeta glanced at her, his usual scowl returning. "Don't mention it. Just don't do anything that's stupid again." Goku clapped Vegeta on the back, grinning. "See? You're not so bad after all." Vegeta shrugged him off. "Don't push your luck, Kakarot." As the group began to make their way back, Lila couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The creature had been a manifestation of something far greater, and if they didn't figure out what was really going on, the stakes would only get higher. And somewhere, in the shadows, a pair of unseen eyes watched, a faint smirk playing across their lips. The game was far from over. The sun hung high over the Capsule Corporation training grounds, casting long shadows as Vegeta and Goku sparred with their usual intensity. The air crackled with energy as their fists collided, sending shockwaves rippling across the landscape. Nearby, Bulma watched with a mix of exasperation and pride, her arms crossed as she muttered about the destruction they were causing. But today, something was different. A faint hum in the air, a disturbance in the energy signatures that even Goku paused to notice. "Hey, Vegeta," he said, wiping sweat from his brow, "you feel that? It's like someone's watching us." Vegeta smirked, his eyes narrowing. "TCH. Probably another weakling looking to challenge the Prince of all Scions. Let them come." The disturbance grew louder, a low thrum that vibrated through the ground. Suddenly, a figure descended from the sky, landing with a graceful thud that sent a small cloud of dust billowing around them. The newcomer was tall and lean, their armor a sleek blend of black and silver, adorned with intricate patterns that shimmered faintly in the sunlight. Their hair, a deep shade of crimson, fell in loose waves, and their piercing green eyes scanned the group with an air of calculated curiosity. Well, the figure said, their voice smooth and confident, "The legendary Scions. I've heard so much about you." Vegeta stepped forward, his fists clenched. "Who the hell are you, and what do you want?" The stranger smiled, a hint of mischief in their expression. "My name is Kale. And as for what I want, let's just say I'm here to test your limits." Before anyone could react, Kale lunged forward, their movements a blur. Goku barely had time to block the first strike, a swift kick aimed at his ribs, before Kale spun and launched a barrage of energy blasts at Vegeta. The Saiyan Prince dodged with ease, his smirk widening. "Not bad," Vegeta said, "but you'll have to do better than that." Kale's grin didn't falter as they raised a hand, summoning a swirling vortex of energy that crackled with raw power. "Oh, I'm just getting started." The vortex shot forward, splitting into multiple beams that homed in on both Goku and Vegeta. Goku countered with a Kamehameha, the blue energy wave clashing with Kale's attack in a dazzling explosion of light. Vegeta, meanwhile, charged through the chaos, his fist glowing with a golden aura as he aimed a punch at Kale's midsection. But Kale was ready, sidestepping at the last second and delivering a sharp elbow strike to Vegeta's back that sent him stumbling. Bulma shouted from the sidelines, "Hey! Can you two stop messing around and take this seriously?" Goku laughed, rubbing the back of his head. "Sorry, Bulma. This guy's pretty strong." Vegeta growled, his pride clearly wounded. "Strong? He's nothing compared to me," Kale chuckled, their voice dripping with amusement. "You Scions are as arrogant as they say. But arrogance won't save you." With a flick of their wrist, Kale summoned a pair of energy blades, their edges glowing with a faint green hue. They lunged at Goku, their strikes fast and precise, forcing him to rely on his instincts to dodge and counter. Vegeta, not one to be left out, joined the fray, his fists blazing with energy as he aimed a series of rapid punches at Kale. But Kale's agility was unmatched, their movements fluid and unpredictable as they dodged and parried with ease. The fight intensified, the ground shaking with each clash of energy. Kale's attacks were relentless, a mix of martial arts and energy manipulation that kept Goku and Vegeta on their toes. At one point, Kale unleashed a devastating technique, slamming their palms together to create a shockwave that sent both Scions flying. Goku recovered quickly, his body glowing as he powered up to Super Saiyan. "All right, Kale," he said, his voice steady, "let's see how you handle this." Vegeta followed suit, his golden aura flaring as he transformed. Kale's eyes gleamed with excitement. Now this is more like it. The battle reached new heights, the trio exchanging blows at blinding speed. Goku's fists crackled with energy as he launched a flurry of punches, each one met with a swift block or dodge from Kale. Vegeta, meanwhile, focused on overwhelming Kale with sheer force, his attacks growing more aggressive with each passing moment. But Kale was no ordinary opponent. Their energy blades sliced through the air with deadly precision, forcing Goku and Vegeta to stay on the defensive. At one point, Kale managed to land a solid hit on Vegeta, their blade grazing his arm and drawing a thin line of blood. Vegeta snarled, his pride wounded more than his body. "You'll pay for that," he roared, charging forward with renewed fury. As the fight raged on, it became clear that Kale was more than just a skilled fighter. Their motives were shrouded in mystery, their actions hinting at a deeper agenda. At one point, Kale paused, their gaze shifting to Bulma. "You're the one they call the Whisperer, aren't you?" they asked, their tone suddenly serious. Bulma blinked, caught off guard. Yeah. Why do you ask?" Kale's expression darkened. "Because you're the key to everything. And I can't let you interfere." Before anyone could react, Kale lunged at Bulma, their energy blade aimed straight for her. Goku and Vegeta moved to intercept, but they were too slow. Just as the blade was about to strike, a sudden burst of energy knocked Kale back, sending them skidding across the ground. The source of the energy was a new figure, their presence commanding and their power undeniable. It was a woman, her hair a striking shade of silver and her eyes glowing with a soft blue light. She stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "That's enough, Kale." Kale's eyes widened in surprise, their confidence faltering for the first time. What are you doing here?" The woman smiled faintly. "I could ask you the same question. But I think it's time we had a little chat." She turned to Goku and Vegeta, her gaze piercing. "You two have done well, but this fight is far from over. Kale is not your enemy. Not yet, anyway." With that, she extended a hand, and a portal of swirling energy appeared beside her. "Come, Kale. We have much to discuss." Kale hesitated, their eyes flickering between the woman and the scions. Finally, they nodded, stepping through the portal without another word. As the portal closed, Goku and Vegeta exchanged a look, their confusion evident. "What the hell just happened?" Vegeta growled. Bulma stepped forward, her brow furrowed. "I don't know, but I have a feeling this isn't the last we've seen of them." Goku scratched his head, a grin spreading across his face. "Well, whatever it is, it's gonna be fun finding out." Vegeta rolled his eyes, but even he couldn't hide the spark of curiosity in his gaze. The arrival of Kale and the mysterious woman had shifted the dynamics of their world, introducing new challenges and hidden ties that would test their cohesion and spark rivalries. And as the sun set on the Capsule Corporation, one thing was certain: the battle was far from over. The atmosphere on Earth was thick with tension as Vegeta stood at the edge of the battlefield, his fists clenched and his scowl deepening with every passing second. The air crackled with energy, a telltale sign of the impending clash between the Saiyan Prince and the mysterious new antagonist, Zorath, a being who had emerged from the shadows with a power that rivaled even the gods. Zorath's arrival had thrown the Z fighters into chaos, and now, with Earth's fate hanging in the balance, Vegeta found himself reluctantly teaming up with an unlikely ally, Mira, Earth's renowned animal communicator. Mira had proven herself invaluable in the earlier stages of the conflict, her ability to understand and influence the behavior of creatures, both mundane and otherworldly, giving the team a unique edge. But as the battle raged on, it became clear that Zorath was no ordinary foe. His power was growing, his attacks more calculated, and his presence more menacing with every passing moment. The fight had reached a fever pitch, with Vegeta and Mira working in tandem to keep Zorath at bay. Vegeta's raw power and combat prowess were unmatched, but Zorath's cunning and adaptability made him a formidable opponent. The Saiyan Prince launched a flurry of energy blasts, each one aimed with precision, but Zorath dodged and countered with ease, his movements almost too fast to follow. Mira, standing at a safe distance, focused her energy on the surrounding wildlife, summoning a swarm of creatures to distract and harass Zorath. Birds dive-bombed him, while larger animals like bears and wolves lunged at him from the shadows. For a moment, it seemed like their combined efforts might be enough to turn the tide. But then, everything changed. In a sudden and devastating move, Zorath unleashed a wave of dark energy that swept across the battlefield, obliterating the animals Mira had summoned and sending Vegeta crashing to the ground. The Saiyan Prince groaned in pain, his body battered and bruised, but his pride refused to let him stay down. He pushed himself to his feet, his eyes blazing with determination. "Is that all you've got?" he snarled, his voice dripping with defiance. Zorath merely smirked, his crimson eyes glowing with malice. "You're stronger than I expected, Vegeta," he said, his voice a low, menacing rumble. "But you're still no match for me. And as for your little friend." He turned his gaze to Mira, who was now trembling with fear. "Her tricks won't save you." Before Vegeta could react, Zorath raised his hand, and a dark, swirling vortex appeared in the air above Mira. She screamed as she was lifted off the ground, her body pulled toward the vortex as if by an invisible force. Vegeta's eyes widened in horror. "Mira," he shouted, lunging forward to save her. But Zorath was faster. With a flick of his wrist, he sent a blast of energy hurtling toward Vegeta, forcing him to dodge and lose precious seconds. By the time he regained his footing, Mira was gone, swallowed by the vortex and vanished without a trace. Vegeta's heart pounded in his chest, a mix of rage and guilt surging through him. He had failed to protect her, and now she was gone, possibly dead. The weight of that failure threatened to crush him, but he forced himself to push it aside. There was no time for self-pity. He had to focus. Zorath's laughter echoed across the battlefield, a sound that sent shivers down Vegeta's spine. "You see, Vegeta?" he taunted. "This is the true extent of my power. I am not just a warrior, I am a force of nature. And you? You are nothing but a pawn in my game." Vegeta's fists clenched so tightly that his nails dug into his palms, drawing blood. He wanted to lash out, to unleash every ounce of his power and destroy Zorath where he stood. But something held him back. A voice in the back of his mind, faint but insistent, reminded him of Myra's words from earlier. Sometimes, brute force isn't the answer. Sometimes, you have to think smarter, not harder. It was a lesson Vegeta had struggled to accept, but now, with Mira gone and the stakes higher than ever, he had no choice but to heed it. Taking a deep breath, Vegeta forced himself to calm down and assess the situation. Zorath was powerful, yes, but he wasn't invincible. There had to be a weakness, a flaw in his technique that Vegeta could exploit. As he watched Zorath prepare for another attack, Vegeta noticed something, a slight hesitation, a fraction of a second where Zorath's energy seemed to waver. It was almost imperceptible, but Vegeta's keen instincts caught it. That was the opening he needed. With a roar, Vegeta charged forward, his body a blur of motion as he closed the distance between himself and Zorath. He feinted to the left, then spun around and delivered a devastating kick to Zorath's side. The impact sent Zorath stumbling, but he quickly recovered, his expression twisted with rage. "You'll pay for that, Saiyan," he bellowed, launching a barrage of energy blasts at Vegeta. Vegeta dodged and weaved, his movements precise and calculated. He was no longer fighting with reckless abandon. Instead, he was using his head, analyzing Zorath's patterns and looking for weaknesses. It was a far cry from his usual approach, but it was working. Zorath's attacks were becoming more erratic, his frustration growing with each missed strike. Vegeta could sense that he was gaining the upper hand, but he knew he couldn't let his guard down. One wrong move, and it could all be over. The battle raged on, each blow more intense than the last. Vegeta's body was pushed to its limits, his muscles screaming in protest, but he refused to give up. He couldn't. Not when so much was at stake. As he fought, he thought of Mira, of her courage and determination. She had believed in him, even when he didn't believe in himself. And now, he had to honor that belief. With a final burst of energy, Vegeta unleashed his most powerful attack, a massive energy blast that engulfed Zorath in a blinding light. For a moment, it seemed like the battle was over. But then, as the light faded, Zorath emerged, battered but still standing. His laughter echoed once more, a sound that sent a chill down Vegeta's spine. "You're strong, Vegeta," Zorath admitted. "But you're not strong enough." Vegeta's heart sank as he realized the truth. Zorath was right. No matter how hard he fought, no matter how much he pushed himself, it wasn't enough. He was outmatched. But just as despair threatened to consume him, a voice rang out, a voice he never expected to hear again. "Vegeta." It was Mira. She was alive, her body glowing with a strange, otherworldly energy. "I'm not done yet," she said, her voice filled with determination. "And neither are you." With that, she raised her hands, and a wave of energy surged toward Vegeta, enveloping him in a warm, golden light. He felt his strength returning, his wounds healing, his power increasing. It was as if Mira had given him a second wind, a chance to keep fighting. Vegeta's eyes met Mira's, and for the first time, he felt a sense of true camaraderie. They were in this together, and together, they would win. With renewed vigor, Vegeta charged at Zorath once more, his attacks more focused and powerful than ever. This time, he wasn't fighting alone. This time, he had hope. And with hope on his side, he knew that anything was possible. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, Vegeta felt like they had a chance. And that was all he needed to keep going. The air crackled with tension as Vegeta and the Earth's animal communicator, Lila, stood at the edge of the dense forest, their eyes locked on the horizon where the enemy's fortress loomed like a shadowy monolith. The revelation from Part 4 had shaken them to their cores. The villain, a rogue Saiyan scientist named Dr. Zorn, had not only perfected a bioengineered army of hybrid creatures but had also discovered a way to siphon energy from Earth's ley lines, threatening to destabilize the planet's core within 48 hours. The clock was ticking, and the stakes had never been higher. Vegeta clenched his fists, his pride warring with the urgency of the situation. "We don't have time for your animal nonsense," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "We need to hit them hard and fast." Lila, undeterred, placed a calming hand on his arm. "Your strength is unmatched, Vegeta, but brute force alone won't work this time. Zorn's hybrids are designed to adapt to physical attacks. We need to outthink him, not just overpower him." Vegeta's scowl deepened, but he didn't pull away. "Fine. What's your plan, Whisperer?" Lila's eyes gleamed with determination. "We train. We adapt. And we use everything at our disposal, your Saiyan instincts, my connection to nature, and the environment itself. Together, we can find a way to exploit Zorn's weaknesses." The training began in earnest. Lila led Vegeta deep into the forest, where the ancient trees whispered secrets of the land. She taught him to listen, not just with his ears, but with his ki. "The ley lines are the planet's lifeblood," she explained, her voice steady. "If we can tap into them, even briefly, we might be able to disrupt Zorn's energy siphon." Vegeta scoffed but followed her lead. As they meditated beneath a towering oak, he felt a strange resonance, a pulse of energy that was both foreign and familiar. It was raw, untamed, and unlike anything he had ever encountered. For the first time, he began to understand the depth of Lila's connection to the earth. Their training wasn't limited to meditation. Lila introduced Vegeta to the forest's inhabitants, creatures that had evolved to survive in the harshest conditions. A pack of wolf-like beasts with razor-sharp claws and an uncanny ability to camouflage themselves in the shadows became their sparring partners. At first, Vegeta dismissed them as mere pests, but their coordinated attacks and relentless persistence forced him to adapt. He began to experiment with new tactics, combining his raw power with precision strikes and environmental awareness. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Lila and Vegeta faced off against the pack in a mock battle. The wolves moved as one, their movements fluid and unpredictable. Vegeta dodged a swipe from one, only to be blindsided by another. Frustration boiled within him, but Lila's voice cut through the chaos. "Use the terrain, Vegeta. The trees, the rocks, they're your allies." Taking her advice, Vegeta leapt onto a low-hanging branch, using it to launch himself into a spinning kick that sent two wolves sprawling. He then grabbed a vine, swinging it like a whip to keep the others at bay. The fight became a dance of power and strategy, with Vegeta gradually gaining the upper hand. By the time the wolves retreated, he was breathing heavily but grinning with satisfaction. "Not bad," Lila admitted, a hint of pride in her voice. "But Zorn's hybrids will be far more dangerous. We need to be ready." As the hours passed, their alliance deepened. Vegeta began to respect Lila's insights, while she marveled at his relentless drive. Together, they uncovered a key weakness in Zorn's creations. The hybrid's adaptive abilities were tied to a central control unit hidden within the fortress. Destroy it, and the creatures would lose their cohesion. The night before the final assault, Lila and Vegeta stood atop a cliff overlooking the fortress. The air was thick with tension, the weight of their mission pressing down on them. "We'll need to split up," Lila said, her voice firm. "I'll infiltrate the fortress from below, using the ley lines to disrupt their defenses. You'll take the direct approach, drawing their attention while I disable the control unit." Vegeta nodded, his expression grim. "Don't get yourself killed, Whisperer. I'd hate to have to avenge you." Lila smirked. "Same to you, Prince." The battle began at dawn. Vegeta descended upon the fortress like a storm, his energy blasts tearing through the outer defenses. The hybrids swarmed him, their forms shifting and adapting with each attack. But Vegeta was ready. He used the environment to his advantage, hurling boulders and uprooting trees to create barriers and traps. His experimental tactics kept the hybrids off balance, buying Lila the time she needed. Inside the fortress, Lila moved like a shadow, her connection to the ley lines guiding her through the labyrinthine corridors. She encountered resistance, but her training with Vegeta had honed her reflexes. She used her animal allies, small, agile creatures that had followed her into the fortress, to distract and disorient the guards. When she finally reached the control unit, she unleashed a surge of ley line energy, causing the machinery to spark and overload. The fortress shook as the hybrids faltered, their adaptive abilities failing. Vegeta seized the opportunity, unleashing a devastating final flash that obliterated the remaining defenses. The explosion lit up the sky, a testament to their combined strength and determination. As the dust settled, Vegeta and Lila stood amidst the ruins, battered but victorious. The planet was safe, at least for now. Vegeta turned to Lila, his usual arrogance tempered by a grudging respect. "You're not completely useless, Whisperer." Lila grinned, wiping sweat from her brow. "And you're not as stubborn as you look, Prince." Their journey was far from over, but in that moment, they knew they had forged a bond that would carry them through whatever challenges lay ahead. The stakes had been high, the odds overwhelming, but together, they had proven that even the mightiest enemies could be overcome with courage, strategy, and a little help from the Earth itself. The battlefield was a chaotic storm of energy, the air crackling with the raw power of Saiyan warriors and the desperate determination of Earth's defenders. Vegeta, the Saiyan prince, stood at the center of it all, his fists clenched and his aura blazing like a supernova. Across from him, the enigmatic villain, a rogue Saiyan named Kale, sneered, his own energy flaring in response. The two had been locked in a brutal exchange of blows, each strike shaking the ground and sending shockwaves through the atmosphere. Kale's power was immense, a dark reflection of Vegeta's own, but the prince refused to back down. "You think you can challenge me, a lowborn Saiyan?" Vegeta growled, his voice dripping with disdain. "I am the prince of all Saiyans. I'll show you the true meaning of power." With a roar, Vegeta surged forward, his fists a blur as he unleashed a flurry of punches and kicks. Kale countered with equal ferocity, his movements precise and calculated. The two warriors clashed in mid-air, their fists meeting with a thunderous impact that sent a shockwave rippling through the battlefield. Nearby, Goku struggled against Kale's lieutenant, a cunning fighter named Zira, whose speed and agility made her a formidable opponent. Goku's movements were slower than usual, his body still recovering from the earlier battles, but his determination burned brighter than ever. "You're not getting past me," Zira taunted, her voice dripping with malice as she darted around him, landing quick strikes to his ribs and shoulders. Goku gritted his teeth, his eyes narrowing as he focused on her movements. He had to adapt, to find a way to counter her speed. With a sudden burst of energy, Goku unleashed a Kamehameha wave, forcing Zira to retreat. As she dodged, Goku closed the distance, his fists slamming into her with a series of rapid punches. Zira countered with a spinning kick, but Goku anticipated the move, catching her leg and hurling her across the battlefield. "Not bad," Zira admitted, wiping a trickle of blood from her lip. "But I'm just getting started." Her eyes glowed with a sinister light as her energy surged, her power increasing exponentially. Goku's eyes widened in surprise, but he quickly regained his composure. "If that's how you want to play," he said, his voice steady as his own aura flared to life. The two charged at each other once more, their clash sending shockwaves through the air. Meanwhile, Bulma and her unlikely ally, an Earth animal communicator named Lila, worked tirelessly to support the fighters from the sidelines. Lila's unique ability to communicate with animals had proven invaluable, as she directed a swarm of creatures to distract and harass Kale's forces. Bulma, ever the genius inventor, had rigged up a series of energy dampeners to weaken the enemy's power. "We've got to keep them off balance," Bulma said, her fingers flying over the controls of her device. "If we can disrupt their energy flow, it'll give the guys a fighting chance." Lila nodded, her focus unwavering as she sent a flock of birds to dive-bomb Kale's troops. The distraction was enough to give Vegeta the opening he needed. With a roar, he unleashed a devastating blast of energy, the sheer force of it pushing Kale back. "You're strong, I'll give you that," Kale admitted, his voice strained as he struggled to hold his ground. "But strength alone won't save you." His eyes glowed with a malevolent light as he unleashed a wave of dark energy, the sheer force of it sending Vegeta flying. The prince slammed into the ground, the impact creating a massive crater. For a moment, he lay still, his body battered and bruised. But then, with a growl of defiance, Vegeta pushed himself to his feet, his aura flaring brighter than ever. "You think that's enough to stop me?" he snarled, his voice filled with rage. "I'll show you the power of a true Saiyan." With a roar, Vegeta's energy surged, his body transforming as he ascended to Super Saiyan 2. The ground beneath him cracked and shattered as his power reached new heights. Kale's eyes widened in shock, but he quickly regained his composure. "Impressive," he said, his voice tinged with admiration. "But it won't be enough." The two warriors charged at each other once more, their clash shaking the very foundations of the earth. As the battle raged on, Goku found himself pushed to his limits. Zera's speed and power were unlike anything he had faced before, and he knew he had to dig deep if he wanted to win. With a deep breath, Goku focused his energy, his aura flaring to life as he tapped into the power of Super Saiyan 3. His hair grew long and wild, his muscles bulging with raw power. Zera's eyes widened in shock, but she quickly masked her fear with a sneer. "You think that's enough to beat me?" she taunted, her voice filled with bravado. "I'll show you what true power looks like." With a roar, Zera unleashed a massive wave of energy, the sheer force of it pushing Goku back. But the Saiyan warrior refused to yield. With a roar of his own, Goku countered with a Kamehameha wave, the two blasts colliding in a spectacular explosion of light and energy. The ground beneath them cracked and shattered, the sheer force of their clash sending shockwaves through the air. For a moment, it seemed as though the two were evenly matched, but then, with a final burst of energy, Goku's Kamehameha overwhelmed Zera's attack, the force of it sending her flying. She slammed into the ground, her body battered and broken. Goku landed beside her, his breathing heavy but his resolve unwavering. "It's over," he said, his voice filled with determination. Zera glared up at him, her eyes filled with hatred, but she knew she was defeated. With a final growl of defiance, she slumped to the ground, unconscious. With Zera defeated, Goku turned his attention to the main battle. Vegeta and Kale were locked in a brutal exchange of blows, their movements a blur of speed and power. The two warriors were evenly matched, their auras blazing like twin suns as they clashed again and again. But as the battle wore on, it became clear that Vegeta was beginning to gain the upper hand. His power was immense, his movements precise and calculated. With a roar, Vegeta unleashed a devastating blast of energy, the sheer force of it pushing Kale back. The rogue Saiyan struggled to hold his ground, his body battered and bruised. But then, with a growl of defiance, Kale's aura flared to life, his power increasing exponentially. "You think you've won?" he snarled, his voice filled with rage. "I'll show you the true meaning of power." With a roar, Kale unleashed a massive wave of dark energy, the sheer force of it sending Vegeta flying. The prince slammed into the ground, the impact creating a massive crater. For a moment, he lay still, his body battered and bruised. But then, with a growl of defiance, Vegeta pushed himself to his feet, his aura flaring brighter than ever. "You think that's enough to stop me?" he snarled, his voice filled with rage. "I'll show you the power of a true Saiyan." With a roar, Vegeta's energy surged, his body transforming as he ascended to Super Saiyan 3. The ground beneath him cracked and shattered as his power reached new heights. Kale's eyes widened in shock, but he quickly regained his composure. "Impressive," he said, his voice tinged with admiration. "But it won't be enough." The two warriors charged at each other once more, their clash shaking the very foundations of the earth. As the battle reached its climax, Bulma and Lila watched from the sidelines, their hearts pounding with fear and anticipation. "We've got to do something," Bulma said, her voice filled with desperation. "If we don't stop Kale, he'll destroy everything." Lila nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "We'll find a way," she said, her voice steady. "We have to." With a deep breath, Lila focused her energy, her connection with the animals around her growing stronger. She sent a mental command to the creatures, directing them to swarm Kale and distract him. The rogue Saiyan growled in frustration as the animals attacked, their sharp claws and teeth tearing at his flesh. "What is this?" he snarled, his voice filled with rage. "You think a few pests can stop me?" With a wave of his hand, Kale unleashed a blast of energy, the sheer force of it obliterating the animals. But the distraction was enough to give Vegeta the opening he needed. With a roar, the prince unleashed a devastating blast of energy, the sheer force of it pushing Kale back. The rogue Saiyan struggled to hold his ground, his body battered and bruised. But then, with a growl of defiance, Kale's aura flared to life, his power increasing exponentially. "You think you've won?" he snarled, his voice filled with rage. "I'll show you the true meaning of power." With a roar, Kale unleashed a massive wave of dark energy, the sheer force of it sending Vegeta flying. The prince slammed into the ground, the impact creating a massive crater. For a moment, he lay still, his body battered and bruised. But then, with a growl of defiance, Vegeta pushed himself to his feet, his aura flaring brighter than ever. "You think that's enough to stop me?" he snarled, his voice filled with rage. "I'll show you the power of a true Saiyan." With a roar, Vegeta's energy surged, his body transforming as he ascended to Super Saiyan 3. The ground beneath him cracked and shattered as his power reached new heights. Kale's eyes widened in shock, but he quickly regained his composure. "Impressive," he said, his voice tinged with admiration. "But it won't be enough." The two warriors charged at each other once more, their clash shaking the very foundations of the earth. As the battle reached its climax, the air was thick with tension, the fate of the world hanging in the balance. Vegeta and Kale were locked in a brutal exchange of blows, their movements a blur of speed and power. The two warriors were evenly matched, their auras blazing like twin suns as they clashed again and again. But as the battle wore on, it became clear that Vegeta was beginning to gain the upper hand. His power was immense, his movements precise and calculated. With a roar, Vegeta unleashed a devastating blast of energy, the sheer force of it pushing Kale back. The rogue Saiyan struggled to hold his ground, his body battered and bruised. But then, with a growl of defiance, Kale's aura flared to life, his power increasing exponentially. "You think you've won?" he snarled, his voice filled with rage. "I'll show you the true meaning of power." With a roar, Kale unleashed a massive wave of dark energy, the sheer force of it sending Vegeta flying. The prince slammed into the ground, the impact creating a massive crater. For a moment, he lay still, his body battered and bruised. But then, with a growl of defiance, Vegeta pushed himself to his feet, his aura flaring brighter than ever. "You think that's enough to stop me?" he snarled, his voice filled with rage. "I'll show you the power of a true Saiyan." With a roar, Vegeta's energy surged, his body transforming as he ascended to Super Saiyan 3. The ground beneath him cracked and shattered as his power reached new heights. Kale's eyes widened in shock, but he quickly regained his composure. "Impressive," he said, his voice tinged with admiration. "But it won't be enough." The two warriors charged at each other once more, their clash shaking the very foundations of the earth. As the battle reached its climax, the air was thick with tension, the fate of the world hanging in the balance. Vegeta and Kale were locked in a brutal exchange of blows, their movements a blur of speed and power. The two warriors were evenly matched, their auras blazing like twin suns as they clashed again and again. But as the battle wore on, it became clear that Vegeta was beginning to gain the upper hand. His power was immense, his movements precise and calculated. With a roar, Vegeta unleashed a devastating blast of energy, the sheer force of it pushing Kale back. The rogue Saiyan struggled to hold his ground, his body battered and bruised. But then, with a growl of defiance, Kale's aura flared to life, his power increasing exponentially. "You think you've won?" he snarled, his voice filled with rage. "I'll show you the true meaning of power." With a roar, Kale unleashed a massive wave of dark energy, the sheer force of it sending Vegeta flying. The prince slammed into the ground, the impact creating a massive crater. For a moment, he lay still, his body battered and bruised. But then, with a growl of defiance, Vegeta pushed himself to his feet, his aura flaring brighter than ever. "You think that's enough to stop me?" he snarled, his voice filled with rage. "I'll show you the power of a true Saiyan." With a roar, Vegeta's energy surged, his body transforming as he ascended to Super Saiyan 3. The ground beneath him cracked and shattered as his power reached new heights. Kale's eyes widened in shock, but he quickly regained his composure. "Impressive," he said, his voice tinged with admiration. "But it won't be enough." The two warriors charged at each other once more, their clash shaking the very foundations of the earth. As the battle reached its climax, the air was thick with tension, the fate of the world hanging in the balance. Vegeta and Kale were locked in a brutal exchange of blows, their movements a blur of speed and power. The two warriors were evenly matched, their auras blazing like twin suns as they clashed again and again. But as the battle wore on, it became clear that Vegeta was beginning to gain the upper hand. His power was immense, his movements precise and calculated. With a roar, Vegeta unleashed a devastating blast of energy, the sheer force of it pushing Kale back. The rogue Saiyan struggled to hold his ground, his body battered and bruised. But then, with a growl of defiance, Kale's aura flared to life, his power increasing exponentially. "You think you've won?" he snarled, his voice filled with rage. "I'll show you the true meaning of power." With a roar, Kale unleashed a massive wave of dark energy, the sheer force of it sending Vegeta flying. The prince slammed into the ground, the impact creating a massive crater. For a moment, he lay still, his body battered and bruised. But then, with a growl of defiance, Vegeta pushed himself to his feet, his aura flaring brighter than ever. "You think that's enough to stop me?" he snarled, his voice filled with rage. "I'll show you the power of a true Saiyan." With a roar, Vegeta's energy surged, his body transforming as he ascended to Super Saiyan 3. The ground beneath him cracked and shattered as his power reached new heights. Kale's eyes widened in shock, but he quickly regained his composure. "Impressive," he said, his voice tinged with admiration. "But it won't be enough." The two warriors charged at each other once more, their clash shaking the very foundations of the earth. As the battle reached its climax, the air was thick with tension, the fate of the world hanging in the balance. Vegeta and Kale were locked in a brutal exchange of blows, their movements a blur of speed and power. The two warriors were evenly matched, their auras blazing like twin suns as they clashed again and again. But as the battle wore on, it became clear that Vegeta was beginning to gain the upper hand. His power was immense, his movements precise and calculated. With a roar, Vegeta unleashed a devastating blast of energy, the sheer force of it pushing Kale back. The rogue Saiyan struggled to hold his ground, his body battered and bruised. But then, with a growl of defiance, Kale's aura flared to life, his power increasing exponentially. "You think you've won?" he snarled, his voice filled with rage. "I'll show you the true meaning of power." With a roar, Kale unleashed a massive wave of dark energy, the sheer force of it sending Vegeta flying. The prince slammed into the ground, the impact creating a massive crater. For a moment, he lay still, his body battered and bruised. But then, with a growl of defiance, Vegeta pushed himself to his feet, his aura flaring brighter than ever. "You think that's enough to stop me?" he snarled, his voice filled with rage. "I'll show you the power of a true Saiyan." With a roar, Vegeta's energy surged, his body transforming as he ascended to Super Saiyan 3. The ground beneath him cracked and shattered as his power reached new heights. Kale's eyes widened in shock, but he quickly regained his composure. "Impressive," he said, his voice tinged with admiration. "But it won't be enough." The two warriors charged at each other once more, their clash shaking the very foundations of the earth. As the battle reached its climax, the air was thick with tension, the fate of the world hanging in the balance. Vegeta and Kale were locked in a brutal exchange of blows, their movements a blur of speed and power. The two warriors were evenly matched, their auras blazing like twin suns as they clashed again and again. But as the battle wore on, it became clear that Vegeta was beginning to gain the upper hand. His power was immense, his movements precise and calculated. With a roar, Vegeta unleashed a devastating blast of energy, the sheer force of it pushing Kale back. The rogue Saiyan struggled to hold his ground, his body battered and bruised. But then, with a growl of defiance, Kale's aura flared to life, his power increasing exponentially. "You think you've won?" he snarled, his voice filled with rage. "I'll show you the true meaning of power." The battlefield was a chaotic symphony of energy blasts, shattered earth, and the deafening roars of combatants pushed to their absolute limits. Vegeta, the Saiyan prince, stood at the epicenter, his armor cracked and scorched, his fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles bled. Across from him loomed the monstrous form of Moro, the Planet Eater, his grotesque body pulsating with stolen energy, his eyes gleaming with a malevolent hunger. The fate of the universe hung in the balance, and both warriors knew this was the final clash, a battle that would determine the course of existence itself. Vegeta's breathing was ragged, his body trembling from the sheer strain of pushing beyond his limits. His mind, however, was eerily calm, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions that had once defined him. He thought of Earth, of Bulma and Trunks, of the unlikely bonds he had formed with these humans who had once been beneath his notice. He thought of the Whisperer, the enigmatic animal communicator who had unlocked something deep within him, a connection to life itself, a power that transcended brute strength. Vegeta's lips curled into a smirk. "You've taken everything from others to fuel your power," he growled, his voice low but carrying an undeniable weight. "But you'll never understand what it means to truly fight for something greater than yourself." Moro sneered, his jagged teeth glinting in the dim light. "Spare me your pathetic sentimentality, Saiyan. Power is power, and I have consumed enough to crush you and this pitiful planet." He lunged, his massive form moving with terrifying speed, his clawed hand aimed to rip through Vegeta's chest. But Vegeta was ready. He sidestepped with a burst of energy, his movements fluid and precise, a testament to the training he had undergone with the Whisperer. He countered with a devastating uppercut, his fist crackling with purple energy, the force spirit fission technique that had become his greatest weapon. The impact sent Moro reeling, but the ancient sorcerer quickly recovered, his stolen energy surging to mend his wounds. "You think your little tricks can stop me?" Moro roared, his voice shaking the very ground beneath them. He unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, each one more destructive than the last, forcing Vegeta to dodge and weave with every ounce of his speed. The Saiyan prince gritted his teeth, his body screaming in protest as he pushed himself to the brink. He couldn't afford to falter, not now, not when so much was at stake. As the battle raged on, Vegeta's mind drifted back to his training with the Whisperer. She had taught him to listen, not just to the cries of battle, but to the whispers of life itself. He had learned to sense the energy of every living being, to understand their pain, their hopes, their fears. It was this connection that had allowed him to develop force spirit fission, a technique that could separate stolen energy from its thief. But it was more than just a weapon, it was a reminder of what he was fighting for. You're not just a warrior, the Whisperer had told him. You're a protector. And that's a far greater responsibility. Vegeta's eyes narrowed as he focused on Moro, his senses honing in on the stolen energy that pulsed within the sorcerer's body. He could feel it, the countless lives Moro had consumed, their energy crying out for release. This ends now, Vegeta muttered, his voice barely audible over the chaos. He raised his hand, his fingers splayed, and unleashed a wave of energy that enveloped Moro. The force spirit fission surged through the sorcerer's body, tearing away the stolen energy and returning it to its rightful owners. Moro howled in agony, his form shrinking and weakening as the energy was stripped away. But Moro wasn't finished. With a desperate roar, he summoned the last remnants of his power, his body contorting as he prepared a final, devastating attack. Vegeta braced himself, his body trembling with exhaustion, but his resolve unwavering. He knew this was the moment, the defining moment that would determine the outcome of the battle. As Moro unleashed his attack, a massive energy blast that threatened to consume everything in its path, Vegeta charged forward, his body glowing with a brilliant aura. He met the blast head-on, his fists driving through the energy with sheer force of will. The shockwave from the collision sent ripples through the fabric of reality, the ground cracking and splitting beneath them. For a moment, it seemed as though the universe itself held its breath. Then, with a final, earth-shattering roar, Vegeta broke through the blast, his fist connecting with Moro's chest. The impact was cataclysmic, a burst of energy that illuminated the battlefield like a supernova. Moro's body disintegrated, his form dissolving into nothingness as the stolen energy was finally released. The battlefield fell silent, the only sound the faint crackling of energy and Vegeta's labored breathing. The Saiyan Prince dropped to one knee, his body trembling with exhaustion. He had done it. He had defeated Moro, not just with strength, but with the power of connection, of understanding. He looked up, his eyes scanning the battlefield, and saw the Whisperer standing at the edge of the crater, her expression a mix of relief and pride. "You did it," she said softly, her voice carrying across the distance. "You saved them all." Vegeta nodded, his usual arrogance replaced by a quiet humility. "I couldn't have done it without you," he admitted, his voice rough but sincere. He rose to his feet, his body aching but his spirit unbroken. The battle was over, but the impact of their actions would resonate far beyond this moment. The universe had been reshaped, not just by their victory, but by the bonds they had forged and the lessons they had learned. As the dust settled and the survivors began to emerge, Vegeta felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. He was no longer just a warrior, no longer just a prince. He was a protector, a guardian of life itself. And as he looked to the horizon, where the first rays of dawn were breaking through the darkness, he knew that this was only the beginning. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in his life, Vegeta felt ready to face it, not with anger or pride, but with the quiet strength of someone who had finally found his place in the universe.